Hello, 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 hello. Give everybody a quick second to get here. Hope everybody is recovering from their holiday festivities, as yesterday was Christmas. We are in that unique time, the week between Christmas and New Year's. So, while most people are taking this time off and recharging their batteries and preparing for the new year, what we're going to do tonight is kind of recap a couple of messages that we did the past couple of weeks, but more importantly, we're going to prepare you for this upcoming craziness. And I call it craziness because, quite honestly, it's never made any sense to me. It's been every bit of 35 years now that I've questioned why people wait until the very end of the year to make a resolution and then end up giving up on that resolution mid-January or February. And the only thing I can equate it to is the programming that we had as children. If you're old enough to remember, being in school, whether it was grammar school or high school, before there was an internet, before there was the ability to go check stuff online, we would get assignments, book reports, and they give it to us 6, 7, 8 weeks before it was due. Yet everybody waited to that last weekend, and then everybody was in the library fighting for the same, 5, 6, 7 books, and it's insane. But you know what? That's what we do. That's human nature, is to procrastinate and to put off today what you can do tomorrow or next week or whatever. And sadly, I think we carry that into our adult lives. So let's see if we can't head that off right now going forward. And I've got 2 really cool stories to share with you. But because last week, for those of you that didn't figure it out, last week's message got cut off at 5 minutes, and I went 25, 26, 27 minutes not knowing. I actually was getting the message that we were still live. So I'm going to condense what I was going to do last week and what I had planned to do this week into one 20, 25 minute message tonight. But the key is we have to take the lessons from the previous 2 Facebook Live messages. And the first one, obviously, is to harness our own thoughts, to bring the law of attraction into our lives, because what nobody realizes is if you're not utilizing the law of attraction, you're utilizing the law of repulsion. And the reality is this: we're constantly creating with our thoughts either things that we want to attract that are going to be good for us, or attracting the things that we don't want, because our minds are that powerful. So whether it's positive self-affirmations or negative self-talk, our brain is processing. Just like a computer, whatever you type into the computer, it's going to process. That's us. And the reality is, that's how we were born. We were born with a clean slate, and whatever was put in, whether by our parents, by our teachers, by our brothers and sisters, cousins, neighborhood, childhood friends, whatever, that information goes in and it begins to process, and then we begin to follow that programming. So it's up to us right now to choose to rewire our brains and reprogram the messages. And the cool thing is I have a story tonight that's a real life story that occurred in the last 30 days. And I think it will shed a lot of light and give a lot of you a really good feeling. But as I said, so the first thing we're going to recap right now, obviously, is the power to harness your thoughts. And the second is to do, okay? If you want to believe in the power of your thoughts, what are you doing to make it a reality? And that's that daily self-affirmations. And that's the second message I want you to go back and review. That was where I gave the example of a bank account. And if your bank account was overdrawn $500 or $5,000, you need to keep depositing money into that account to get it above zero into a positive. But while you're doing that, it doesn't feel good. It doesn't feel any better. And unless there's a way to actually gauge that, you're just struggling to figure out, am I going to get out of that negative zone and be positive in my bank account if you're not looking at statements? So I give that example because it's a really powerful way to look at self-affirmations for those of you that are the way I was, where you just don't feel it. If you're feeling crappy and someone says, go say nice things about yourself, it's not that easy to just go, okay, that's the secret. I'm just going to say nice things about myself and everything's going to get better. It's not how it works. It's a process. But if you're willing to invest the time into the process, it'll work. So those are the two stories that we're recapping tonight. And I've got some examples to make that real easy to understand and appreciate. But the first thing I want to talk about is the concept of feelings and where they come from. Because most people, myself included, we have the misguided mindset of, when I have whatever it is that you want, then I'm going to feel good. And so we spend so much of our time, we invest/waste so much of our time chasing things that we believe are going to bring us happiness. So whether it is, the easy one is the addictions. There are people that choose to check out, whether it's alcohol, drugs, whether it's food, because eating disorder is just as much of an addiction. Workaholics, that was my drug of choice for a long time. You can get addicted to work so that you can check out. There are people that are shopaholics. They're constantly buying things, and that's their checking out. You can fill in the blank. There's dozens of them. So addiction does not just mean alcohol or drugs or whatever. But we've got to recognize that we're not going to fulfill that void inside and fulfill that need or whatever it is that we're desiring from an emotional standpoint with stuff. We have to switch our brain to say, I feel. And when you can consistently say, I feel, therefore I now can do, I can be, I can have, magically things will happen. But that's the trick. How do we go ahead and convert the mindset from a lack mentality of, when I have, then I can feel, to the abundance mentality, where we're thinking in the present tense, and in a positive sense that we already possess what it is that we want. So we create that feeling, and then magically things will work into our path. So let me use the example. When I was a personal trainer, years ago, I had a unique skill set. Because I was a triathlete, I had a unique ability to coach and to train people for triathlons. And it was funny because everybody wanted to do them, but they weren't really prepared for what it was going to take. And so I shared with them, and I would actually work one-on-one at least one day a week with the clients to prepare for that. But what I try to explain to them was it was all a mental game. Meaning, when I was a triathlete and I did the Olympic distance, so for those of you that don't follow it, it'll make sense to you when I say it. The Olympic distance for triathlons was a mile swim, a 25-mile bike, and then a 10K or a 6.2-mile run. That was the race. And so when you train for that, you don't ever do an entire triathlon in training. You don't practice that way. That's not how you do it. What you do is you trick your brain to prepare for the race. So the way we used to train, and it wasn't just me, it was all of us, is we would take one leg. So if we were going to train for the swim, we would go do 3 miles. And you swim 3 miles. You don't bike, you don't run, but you swim 3 miles. Sometimes we swam 5 miles. But we would kill ourselves on the swim. And then the next week, during the course of all the other training, we would switch to the bike. And we might do a 100-mile bike ride. Now think about that. The bike race is 25 miles. The swim part of the race was only 1 mile. Why would we bike 100 miles? We didn't swim that day and we didn't run that day, but we biked 100 miles. And then on the run day, again, we would do this once. We'd pick one leg each week, during the course of our training. So on the run day, we might go run 15 or 20 miles. Again, you're only going to run 6.2 in the race. Why would you run 15 or 20? But what it did was it trained our bodies to mentally know, oh my God, swim a mile. I've swam 5 before. Or ride 25 miles. I've already ridden 100. Or run a 10K or 6.2 miles. I've already run 20. So your brain is now conditioned to tell your body, shut up and keep going. You've already done this. You've done way harder than this. So to train for the triathlon, you piece those 3 things together and you're only doing a much smaller version of each of the 3. However, you're doing them at the same time. So when people say, wow, that's amazing, you did a triathlon in 2 hours. Yeah, it's not that amazing when you break it down to a mile swim, a 25-mile bike, a 6.2-mile run. If you've already done 3, 4, 5-mile swims before, 50 to 100-mile bike rides before, 15 or 20-mile runs before. When you condense them down, it's like doing little sprints. But the idea is you have to train your brain. So when I was a trainer, a personal trainer, I had that unique skill that I could take people, because there was a time where it was this big fad. Everybody wanted to do triathlons, but nobody knew how to do it. Nobody knew how to prepare for them. Nobody knew how to train for them. So they were doing all kinds of crazy stuff. But the idea is, way back then, before I understood the law of attraction, before I understood the power of the mind or any of that stuff, we were doing it and then I was teaching it just because it made sense and it was real. The same thing would apply, obviously, when it came time to do the race, because so many people fail to appreciate and recognize the importance of recognizing and celebrating the little victories when you are A, training, and B, competing. So again, when I would be working with these people, I would tell them, look, you've never run 6.2 miles before, so let's build up to it. And it was funny because they would always, the phrase is bite off more than they could chew. They wanted to jump right into a 10K. And I'd say to them, how about we do this? How about we focus for the next 2 weeks, getting you from where you are right now to being able to run without stopping. I don't care how slow, you have to slow down the treadmill, but without stopping 2 miles. And it would take them every bit of 2 weeks to get to a 2-mile run without stopping. Now, I wanted them to celebrate that. And they would get all down on themselves. Well, it's only 2 miles and there's so much more. And I told them, I said, you got to understand something. If you don't celebrate the little victories, if you don't recognize, if you don't acknowledge, if you don't appreciate all of your little victories, which are your strengths, you'll never make it. Because everyone out there is focused on your flaws, is focused on your weaknesses, is waiting for you to quit or fail. Everybody, whether they say it or not, they're rooting for you to fail because that's how they feel better about themselves. And we'll get to that in a second. So you got to celebrate the little victories and condition your brain, okay? Now, why was that so important? Let's talk about a marathon. A marathon is 26.2 miles. 26.2 miles. Why do they have water stations every 1.5 miles during a marathon? I'm going to pause there and give you all a chance to, since I've been talking nonstop, to give me a thumbs up or a 1 if this is starting to make sense. But why do they set up water stations every 1.5 miles and have dozens and dozens and dozens of volunteers at those water stations? Anybody want to take a guess why? I'll give you a hint. It has nothing to do with water. Because they could have bottles of water or cups of water sitting out there on the table for us when we go by. But that's not the reason for the stations. The stations are set up because the runners need that encouragement. They need that support. Because I'm not talking about elite athletes that are going to go do a marathon in 3.5, 4 hours. I'm talking about the people that are going to take 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 hours to do their very first marathon. And they're not elite athletes. In fact, they're probably battling self-doubt the entire race. So for example, you get to mile marker 3. You're 3 miles into the race. You get to that water station. You're dying. All they're doing is congratulating you and supporting you and cheering you on. Yeah, they're going to hand you a glass of water. And yeah, you're going to be grateful for that water. But you know what's going to happen? They're going to make sure you keep going. Because your knees could hurt. Because your back could hurt. Because your body could be saying, what are we doing? I was crazy signing up for this marathon. Why did I even bother? Now, all I can tell you is that encouragement, that support makes all the difference in the world. And I experienced it myself at one of my early triathlons. I did a triathlon back in San Diego, California in the early 90s. And it was one of my very first ones. So I wasn't super confident. And while I was running the last leg of the triathlon, which was the 6.2 mile 10K, my knee was just shot. I was in so much pain that I was basically limping, and I still had probably 1.5 miles, 2 miles to go. Now, in San Diego, you have the Marine Corps Recruiting Depot, and there were hundreds of Marines in this triathlon. And back then, I was in much different shape. I actually looked like an athlete, and I had a buzz cut. I didn't have long hair. I had a buzz cut. And so I was literally about to start walking because all I kept saying to myself was, why am I putting myself through this pain? No one's paying me any money. I'm not going to win this race. I'm just going to slow down and I'm going to walk and I'll finish, but I'm going to walk this last couple of miles because my knee's killing me. And as I almost slowed down to a walk, I heard from behind me, keep running, Marine, or I'll kill you where you stand. And as I turned over my shoulder, there was this gigantic drill sergeant. And he was right behind me screaming at the top of his lungs. And I was trying to explain to him that I wasn't a Marine. He didn't really care what I was saying. He just kept screaming over me to run or he was going to beat me where I was. So guess what? Fear took over. I wasn't able to negotiate. I wasn't able to communicate that I wasn't one of his Marines. And I had a very legitimate belief that he was going to beat me right there in the street. So I ran. And I ran the last 2 miles. My pain in my knee magically disappeared because the fear and he stayed right behind me. He literally ran all the way to the finish line screaming at me. Now, we crossed the finish line. I'm ready to collapse. He keeps going. I went and found him. I actually had to go find him. And I said to him, I said, sir, I said, I'm not one of your Marines. And he started laughing. He goes, I don't care. He goes, you finished the race. And he just walked away from me. And that's when I realized, oh my God, your mind really does override everything else going on in your body because my knee was screaming, stop. My brain was saying, what are you killing yourself for? But the very real belief, which was a fear that he was going to beat me right where I was, allowed me to keep running. So I want you to understand something. When I teach these things, I'm not reading it from a book. I'm not magically just trying to make stuff up. There is real science that goes on beyond the mystical woo-woo stuff. And I'm telling you right now, from a physiological standpoint, my knee was shot. From a mental and emotional standpoint, that fear in my head was real. And you know what? That fear, that belief, sent whatever endorphins it needed to my knee to shut my knee up enough that I could run so that I could avoid the very real fear of being beaten by that drill sergeant. So I want you to understand something. That was a real life example of how this works. Now, to kind of put this in perspective, it works the same way. Whether you're going to make a New Year's resolution goal that you want to lose weight, it's the same exact thing. You have to set a realistic goal. You have to set a daily plan of action, and you've got to be very consistent and accountable with it. Now, again, when I was a personal trainer, it was very easy for me to say to anyone, when they hired me, whatever your goal is, I'll make sure that you hit it. If you want to lose 30 or 40 pounds, not a problem. We would set up a game plan, but the game plan would be realistic. It would be something that we could measure, and it would be something that you could celebrate on a weekly basis. And usually the game plan was 2 pounds a week. Now, I'm going to pause there for a second because you can do simple math. If you want to lose 30 pounds or you want to lose 40 pounds, the question isn't, John, if I hire you, can I do it? The question is, if you hire me, will you follow the game plan and remain consistent enough that if you want to lose 40 pounds, will you give me 20 weeks? Will you give me 25 weeks? Because the goal is not to just lose weight and then gain it back. The goal is to create healthy habits, create consistent daily plan of action, and then execute that consistent daily plan of action so that you don't have to hire me for the rest of your life. So that at 20, 22, 25 weeks, you've achieved your goal, but you now function without the need to have me holding your hand or accountable. Let me know if that makes sense to you, because it didn't matter what anybody's goal was, whether it was a fitness goal or a weight loss goal or a training goal or a competitive goal. It didn't matter. We could achieve anything if you brought the consistent work ethic. I'll give you a couple more things here and then we'll wrap up. Now, the two challenges that we have are self-sabotage, and fear of judgment. Now, I'm not going to ask anybody to communicate publicly here, but I will tell you that the majority of us struggle with the fear of judgment of others, specifically because of our own judgment. Meaning, the baseline to be at peace, to truly be at peace, is the following. Whatever you're going to do, whatever it is, whatever that you're going to do it because it makes you happy. Do it because it makes you happy, whatever it is. And if you do it because it makes you happy and without any expectation from anyone else, meaning you're not seeking anyone else's approval, you're not seeking anyone else to be grateful and reciprocate, so you have no expectations of anything. Whatever you do, baseline, don't do harm to others. So don't hurt others, don't take advantage of others, don't infringe upon anyone else's rights, but do what makes you happy, truly makes you happy, and do it with zero expectations from anyone else. And you will have inner peace and calm, because you're not on any level seeking anyone else's approval. And if you're not seeking anyone else's approval, you have zero fear of judgment. If you're doing it for you and you're doing it because it makes you happy, no one can interfere with that. No one can interfere with that. Now, here's where we get off track. Because we don't have the self-love, because we don't have the self-care, because we don't have a healthy self-worth, here's what happens. We're seeking that value, that approval, that confirmation from someone else. And in doing so, we're not able to look in the mirror and be happy. So what I will share with you is, if you find yourself being critical or judgmental of anyone else ever, stop and ask yourself, why am I doing that? Ask yourself, why am I doing that? Because 99% of the time, the judgments, the criticisms that you put on other people is a reflection of what you are afraid to say to yourself. Meaning, if you look in the mirror and you're not happy with your physique, whether you want to get in better shape or you want to lose weight, you will find that you are hyper critical and judgmental of everyone around you. once you become happy and accepting of your physique and physical appearance, you don't even notice other people. I'm going to pause there for a second. Please give me a thumbs up or a 1 if that makes sense. I know this is painful for a lot of people, but this is the reality, and I'm trying to get you in the best mental place going into the new year. So if you can manage to learn to accept who you are and where you are right now, and I'm being serious when I say this, doing the daily self-affirmations, it's called mirror work, but being able to look in the mirror, being able to repeat the positive self-affirmations, when you can do that, make eye contact with yourself, say it with a purpose, say it with enthusiasm, then and only then will you eradicate the self-judgment, which is the self-sabotage, which leads to the fear of judgment of others. So that's why it's so important that you go watch the video from 2 weeks ago where I talk about the bank account. Now, I'm going to give you a real life story of how this has worked. And again, I always keep the names and everybody anonymous, but I'm going to change a couple of the facts so that nobody can figure out who I'm talking about. But there's an individual that I've known for many, many years. And this is an individual that has been struggling with an alcohol addiction for a long time. And this individual, he or she, this individual has struggled. They've done AA, they've done a number of different programs, but the reality is it's been over a decade, and the sad reality is this person has never been able to voluntarily go more than 2 weeks, 13, 14, 15, 16 days, without falling off the wagon and having a unfortunate situation with alcohol. And it'll last 3, 4, 5 days, and they destroy their body and they destroy their mind mentally. And then they spend another week abusing themselves because of the frustration and the disappointment. So it's this horrible cycle. And so I've known this person, I've worked at arm's length with this person, but about a month and a half, 2 months ago, for whatever reason, this individual said to me, I'm asking you right now to be my accountability partner and my coach. I'm going to hire you because I don't take on clients anymore. I've stopped doing that. They said, I'm going to hire you because I need you to stay on top of me with this. And I said, if you're serious, I'll do it, but that's not my world anymore. And they said, yes. And I said, okay. What we did was 2 things. Number 1, we had to have a very specific focus. And for those of you that remember, about 2 weeks ago, maybe 2.5 weeks ago, I did a post of a guy that was hanging off of a cliff. And it said, when your focus is clear, it's easy to accomplish anything. And I had to get this individual to sort through all of the craziness in their thought process to answer the question, what is the most important thing right now? And it was weird because I don't know, and it's a highly intelligent individual, so I don't know if they were just not seeing it or afraid to admit it or whatever. But after, 27 guesses, I got frustrated and I said, shut up. I said, the only thing that you should be focused on is you're sober right now. And I said, you have to understand, if you were hanging off of a cliff, what would be the only thing you were focused on? And they said, holding on to that, pole or branch or bar or whatever it is. I said, exactly. So you'd hold on to that with everything you had and you would be focused on that. They said, yep. And I said, well, what if help didn't come and day turned into night and overnight you managed to hold on? And the next day, what would be your focus? And they laughed and they said, focus wouldn't have changed. I said, well, welcome to your life, because right now, that's how serious you've got to take your sobriety. Every waking moment, you have to remind yourself, I'm sober right now. I'm amazing because I'm sober right now. And all throughout the day, keep reminding yourself that you are sober right now. And I know it wasn't something that they wanted to do. I know that it was something that they had fought me on, and they didn't believe. And for the first probably week and a half, and by the way, not only did I make this individual put that guy hanging off the cliff as the screensaver on their phone, I have this person on a daily basis checking in with me. They have alarms set on their phone. Call John. If John doesn't answer, text John. Because I want all throughout the day this individual to reach out to me to say, hey, I wanted to let you know I'm sober. And I know this sounds stupid, but this was the rewiring of their brain to understand that, yes, I am sober. Because they've been looking for a long time at their life as till the next bout of alcoholism, to the next bout of drinking. And instead, I want them completely focused in the present, I am, and in the positive, sober. Now, here's the amazing part of this story. So even though they were fighting me on it, they were doing it. They were doing the affirmations throughout the day. There's about 5 or 6 affirmations that they would repeat. And they were reaching out to me, and that's on their phone. Now, here's the cool thing. About a week ago, 6 days ago, whatever it was. And by the way, this is the Christmas season. This is the holiday season. This is the worst time for people that are struggling with addictions, because this is the highest incidence of depression during the course of the year. This person reached out to me and said, we need to talk. So I'm thinking, oh man, what happened? So we were talking face to face on video. And so I could see the seriousness in their face. And this is the coolest part of the story. This person says to me, John, for over a decade, I have had 2 recurring nightmares almost every night. And these 2 nightmares, one, all of a sudden the nightmare begins and I'm already drunk. I'm already sitting there and there's beer bottles all over and I'm drunk. And I don't know how it happened. But I wake up frustrated because I'm drunk and I don't know how it happened. And the second nightmare, they're standing in front of a liquor store and they're having the conversation and they go in and they buy the alcohol. And those are recurring nightmares that they've had for over a decade. So when this person said, I need to talk to you, this is what they told me. 2 nights in a row, and I haven't asked if it's continued or not, but 2 nights in a row, they said, I've had the same dream. Not a nightmare, dream. I'm standing in front of the liquor store, debating whether or not to go in. And for the first time in my entire life, I looked at the reflection in the door, in the glass door of the liquor store, and I said, I'm sober and I'm amazing. And turned around and walked away. Now you tell me how powerful that dream had to be if after over 10 years of waking up to the nightmare of already being drunk or going in and getting the alcohol, that 2 nights in a row, their brain has rewired to now their subconscious, unconscious mind while they're sleeping is giving a different story in the dream, that they are now actually looking at themselves in the reflection in the door because I make them do their affirmations in the mirror. They're now having in the dream the result that they're looking at in the mirror. Folks, all I can tell you is that's real. And they were teared up and crying while they were telling me the story. So I know it wasn't a bunch of BS. And I know it wasn't easy to say because it was an admission that, oh my gosh, I actually have this power that I've never harnessed my entire life. So yeah, it's real. It's very real. And I'm going to leave you with one last story that I actually took some notes on, because if you think my personal story is BS or you think this story is BS, I'm going to give you one that you can't challenge. And this is maybe one of the greatest stories of the power of the mind. So back in 1954, there was an overwhelming belief all over the world. This was a 100% belief that a human could not run a mile in less than 4 minutes. That it was physically impossible for the human body to do that without breaking down, without the heart exploding, without your knees falling apart. They literally said it was impossible. All the leading experts, all the public opinion, everybody said it was impossible, except one guy. One guy by the name of Roger Bannister believed in his own mind that he could run a mile in less than 4 minutes. So every day he visualized, and every day he went out there and he ran, and every day he failed. But he never stopped believing. And on May 6th, 1954, Roger Bannister eclipsed the 4-minute mark and did a mile in 3 minutes and 59.4 seconds. Now, I want that to just kind of sit there for a second, because in the history of humans, it was never done. In the history of mankind, of humans, it was never done. And by the way, they did all kinds of tests where they were trying to stimulate and create, extra incentive. In one country, they had bulls running behind people to stimulate them to run faster. And they could not get a human to run a mile, in less than 4 minutes. Roger Bannister did it. Now, here's the amazing part of the story. I got the notes here, so I'm accurate. Nobody in the history of mankind, May 6, 1954, Roger Bannister does it. 6 weeks later, John Landry breaks that record and does a mile in 3 minutes and 57.9 seconds. So does anybody want to explain to me what happened? What changed that nobody in history did it, and 6 weeks after Roger Bannister did it, somebody else doesn't just break 4 minutes, but breaks it by more than 2 seconds, which is a big deal? What happened? What was the difference? Was there a difference in training? Was there a difference in technology? What was it that changed that allowed John Landry to break the mile mark in less than 3 minutes and 58 seconds? It's one word. Belief. Belief. When Roger Bannister broke the 4-minute mile, all of a sudden, guess what? It was possible. It went from impossible to possible. Now here's the cool thing, and the facts always get screwed up, but these are the facts. It took another year, but a year later, 3 people broke the 4-minute mile in a single race. So Roger Bannister does it in May of 1954. John Landry does it in June of 1954. And then a year later, in May of 1955, 3, not 1, not 2, but 3 people did it in the same race. What does that tell you? What does that tell you? The power of the mind. The belief that something is actually possible will now overcome the physical limitations that we put on ourselves. And to wrap up the statistics on this, over the next 5 years, so from May 6, 1954, for the next 5 years, a total of 21 people eclipsed the 4-minute mile. Now, again, that may not sound like a big deal because today high school athletes do it. But you got to understand something. That was the greatest human achievement in the history of mankind. And what happened was the mind was set free. So my request to each and every one of you right now is get your mind straight. Everything that we've been doing this past 3-4 weeks has been to clear your mind of garbage, allow yourself to believe, to think clearly, to focus on what it is that you want, and then to set a plan of action to create the belief system within you, not anywhere else, the belief system within you, that whatever you want, it's actually possible. And if you're willing to do the work, if you're willing to invest the time, anything that you want is yours. That's our message going into the new year. I hope that you will go back and watch, not the last week's, because that was only 5 minutes. Like I said, it got cut short. In fact, I'm going to delete it so nobody accidentally is watching that one. But go back and watch the last 2 Facebook Lives and take notes, because the next time we speak, next Wednesday, it'll be 2019. And what I'm what I am going to avoid is allowing anybody that truly desires change, improvement, success, to fall short on their own goals. I'm not going to call them resolutions because I think it's goofy, but whatever goals you're setting for yourself, whether it's a physical fitness, weight loss, or it's a financial fitness and financial stability, or whatever it is you want to do, we're going to set a game plan up and put that into motion starting next Wednesday, which will be January 2nd. So until then, this is John Costino saying thanks for being here. Please comment, please share this, and I look forward to seeing you next Wednesday. Until then, God bless. Bye-bye, everyone.